What's up, everybody? This is Cecil Alexander with Jazz Lesson Videos, and we're going to be talking about a couple different ways that you can improve your jazz guitar technique. We're going to be using phrases that are borrowed from my package with jazz lesson videos entitled 57 Double Time Lines, and each phrase is going to be focusing on a different technique that will help you improvise your own fast phrases with clear articulation, dynamics, and time feel. So if you feel like digging a little bit deeper into this topic, feel free to check out that resource. Again, 57 Double Time Lines, and you can use the coupon code CA5 for an additional $5 off. Let's dive into it. So this first phrase is going to focus on a technique that's called cross picking, which is really big in bluegrass and country guitar, but in jazz guitar, I think it can really help you to express ideas that are really close to like what a saxophone or a trumpet might play with really clear articulation. So this technique is basically crossing from one string to the next using just one pick stroke. So this sort of motion. So the hardest thing about cross picking is when you get kind of trapped inside of the strings. Some people will describe this as being inside picking. So rather than having this motion that goes outside of the strings, inside picking would be like when the pick is trapped inside the string. So I generally try to avoid this for faster lines, just because that motion I think is really difficult to control and get up to speed. But for like medium tempo lines, I think that motion kind of comes in without you really thinking about it. But for this phrase, we're going to be focusing on the outside side of things. So the full phrase is going to be over a 2-5-1 in C major. So we have D minor 7, G7, C major 7, and it'll sound like this slowly. So we're going to focus on just the first measure of the phrase that happens over D minor 7. So we have this as the beginning. So when you're practicing a phrase like this, and really this will apply to any of the phrases that we check out today, if you have difficulty with that motion, that cross-picking motion, I would recommend first getting it under your fingers and getting it to the point where it feels like muscle memory, and maybe you can even hear the phrase before you play it. And then I would just floor it, basically, and try to play it as fast as you can or at a tempo that feels very uncomfortable, because this will reveal to you what motions you really need to be making in order to get it up to speed. So once you play it at a tempo that's uncomfortable with you, it might sound kind of sloppy, but at least you'll be able to see, you know, different sections of the phrases that really are giving you difficulty. I think when we start by moving a phrase up incrementally with a metronome too early, sometimes it's not really beneficial because you're not really sure how it feels to play the phrase fast. So you'll get up to that faster tempo and it'll still be challenging because your hands are moving so much differently fast than they were slow. So get it under your fingers, get it to the point where it's muscle memory really slowly, and then just play it really quickly so that you can see where those deficiencies are in your technique. But kind of zoning in on this section a little bit more, I'm picking it the way that I am specifically so that I can get that outside picking motion in with the cross picking. So if I were to be alternate picking all of this, starting with a downstroke, I'd run into some issues. So there you'll see that inside picking motion, which again creates a lot of tension in the right hand. It's very difficult to control the articulation and the dynamics and things like that. So I start with a downstroke into a hammer-on. So from C to D, I hammer on that D, and then I do an upstroke on B, and then I start that cross-picking motion, which is just like major thirds descending. So B, G, B flat, G flat, and then into A with an upstroke. So, and then from there, that upstroke, I'm able to freely cross to the second string with that B string. So the next phrase is going to be focusing on string skipping, using alternate picking. And the whole phrase, again, is going to be over a 2-5-1 in C major. So again, we have D minor 7, G7, C major 7, and this is the sound of the phrase slowly. So there are two sections of the phrase that I want to zone in on. The first is going to be the first like 2 beats, basically. So there's an interesting thing happening there with this string skip from the B string to the D string. So after we get from the 4th to the flat 3rd of D minor 7, we leap down to the 5th. And then we do this kind of enclosing of the 5th with a half step below approach. So very important thing happening in my right hand there. I am, again, picking the first 2 notes. So downstroke, upstroke, and then I pull off into that F natural. And then that pull off, also with that upstroke motion, allows me to freely cross into the D string. So if I were to be alternate picking all of that, again, starting with the downstroke, I'm again kind of forcing the pick to be trapped inside the strings with this sort of inside picking motion. So string skipping, I think, is a lot easier when the last pick stroke is an upstroke. That kind of just allows you to get anywhere that you want. So I could get down to that F an octave lower a lot easier, or in as we have in the phrase, I could get down to that A a lot easier. And even if I were to take out that chromatic approach, that makes it a lot easier to just skip to whatever string I want from there. So another excerpt of the phrase where we're going to have that string skipping motion is going into the C major 7 from G7. So starting on beat 4 of the G7, we have this chromatic enclosure. And again, it's very important how I'm picking that, because after that I'm going to skip from the G string down to the A string. So after that enclosure, I make sure that I land on an upstroke so that I can skip to the next string freely. So I'm starting with the downstroke on B, an upstroke on D, pull off from D to D flat, downstroke on B, and then an upstroke on C, and again from that upstroke I can freely cross down to that E on the A string. So, and again, even going from that E to B up at the G string, I'm making sure that I'm avoiding that inside picking motion. So I'm alternate picking to get to that G string there, which feels a lot more natural than going from an upstroke to a downstroke, because again, you're going to be trapped inside the strings like that. So our next phrase is going to be focusing on the downward sweep motion, which I think is really important in the jazz language just because of the use of arpeggios being so prominent. So this phrase is going to be over a minor 2-5-1. It's going to start with D minor 7 flat 5, G7 altered, into C minor 7. Here's how the whole phrase sounds put together. Faster. So this phrase is going to start off with this A flat major 7 arpeggio idea happening over D minor 7 flat 5. I think the difficult thing about incorporating that shape into this phrase is going from that downward sweep motion into strict alternate picking. So this would be a really good phrase to, again, try just getting under your fingers and then trying to play it at a tempo that feels uncomfortable and see, you know, how your hands are working to create that motion. So I find that when I do downward sweeps, the pick is generally going to be a little bit more buried in the strings. So, and then the rest of the motion, picking wise, especially alternate picking or things where I'm doing economy picking, the pick is moving outside of the strings a little bit more. So. I find that when I'm learning phrases, if I see that sort of motion where the shape of the line is traveling across adjacent strings, usually a downward sweep is going to be the way to take care of that. Or if it's moving in this direction, like towards the ceiling, an upward sweep, but we'll talk about that in a later phrase. I feel like if you use alternate picking for that, it'll work pretty well at a medium tempo or a slower tempo. In fact, I would recommend doing it at a slower tempo because you'll be more in control of the time feel, but particularly at faster tempos or when you're going for a double time idea, the sweep is going to save you a lot of motion. So our next phrase is also going to be over a minor 2-5 going into C minor. So D minor 7 flat 5, G7 into C minor. And this phrase is going to work on incorporating slurs in the middle of a phrase. So you may have noticed this in the last couple of phrases, but slurs can be a really great way of resetting your picking hand so that you can put it in position for a string change or a downward sweep or something like that, just for like when the hand is in motion and kind of needs a chance to reset, basically. So here's the full phrase. So you'll notice that the phrase starts off with this chromatic approach. It's going to go from the 4th down to the 9th of D minor 7 flat 5. I'm starting that with a downstroke, and I'm also starting the pick stroke on the next string with a downstroke, which may seem a little bit counterintuitive, but it feels very natural, I think. It's a lot more natural to start the phrase with a downstroke than an upstroke, and also using the slur gives your hand time to reset, like I mentioned before. So there's that motion. In addition to being a really great technical device and giving your hands time to reset, slurs can also be a really great way of giving your lines a little bit more of a horn-like phrasing or articulation. I think that if we're alternate picking everything, things can get a little bit too staccato, so you want that variance in your phrasing to make things sound like natural and lyrical even when you're playing fast stuff. So this next phrase is going to focus on developing ideas on the fretboard that complement your right hand and make things a lot easier to play. One thing that I think that we can take into consideration when we're trying to make phrases that are easy for us to play fast is paying attention to having an even number of pick strokes per string. So this is something that I focused on quite a bit when I was trying to develop my technique. And I would take phrases that I would transcribe and I would try to rework them, maybe that comprised of changing some of the notes, maybe just using a different fingering, but I tried to rework them so that I was just using an even number of pick strokes per string. Because what this does is it allows the right hand to kind of stay on one plane and stop making this like position shift, if you will. So usually when I'm playing faster ideas, you'll notice that my right hand is kind of just like I'm doing the alternate picking thing, but I'm just trying to keep it uniform basically rather than flipping a lot like that. So this phrase is going to be over the 1 major 7 in C, so C major 7, and then we have a minor 2-5 that leads us into the 6th chord. So B minor 7 flat 5, E7 into A minor 7. So the whole phrase will sound like this. So the part of the phrase that I want to bring to your attention is the part that happens over the minor 2-5, so B minor 7 flat 5, E7 into A minor 7. And I'm going to start with the last note of the previous measure, just because that's going to be the first note that happens on the B string. So I start with a downstroke, and I'm just using all alternate picking, so that's from A flat, G, F, into E. So you'll notice that's an even number of pick strokes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, an even number of pick strokes is going to allow you to stay in one sort of plane and keep things uniform with your right hand, but it's also going to avoid awkward string changes and things like inside picking that I was talking about before, because you can run into that even when you're using a lot of alternate picking. So we have an even number of pick strokes on the B string, and then chromatically down to C, and that's also an even number of pick strokes. So then we have 2 notes on the D string, and then we have 4 notes on the A string. And then we can use that upstroke that we end the A string with to jump up to the G string. and then end the phrase like so. And that section that happens from B minor 7 flat 5 to E7, that's something that feels really comfortable, and it's kind of a little piece of vocabulary that I use as like a building block. Like I glue it to a lot of different things, and I also use it as a phrase ending quite a bit. So that's something that I would practice with that piece of language, but also with any other piece of language that you come up with that feels comfortable for your right hand. An example might be playing kind of a variation going from B minor 7 flat 5, E7 to A minor 7, something like so I use that chunk as sort of a block in the lines. It's a nice like altered scale phrase ending sort of. So I hope you're able to see through the study of these phrases how you can incorporate these techniques into your playing. And with focused study of these techniques, I think that you can apply them to lines that you transcribe or lines that you come up with. And again, studying these techniques will help a lot with expressing yourself at faster tempos and when you're playing double time lines with clear articulation, dynamics, and phrasing and time feel. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into some of these techniques, feel free to check out the package with jazz lesson videos, 57 double time lines, and use the coupon code CA5 for an additional $5 off. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.